Good morning. I'm Margaret Drinkwine. It's my pleasure to welcome you, and I realized as I was sitting up here just 2 minutes ago, I forgot my name tag, so I am not modeling good congregational behavior, and mea culpa. At any rate, what I was remarking about, though, to myself as I was listening is how much more conversation there is on a sunny day. Isn't it lovely to be here on a day when it's not snowing? That's a celebration in itself, but it is an honor to be up here and welcoming all of you. I'd also like to welcome the online people. I have certainly spent my days watching online and appreciate that ability of a way to touch us too. At this point, we'd like to welcome any visitors or guests. If there are visitors who are here who are comfortable standing up and telling us who you are and where you're from, we'd love to greet you. Or if there are members who've brought guests with them. Either way, we'd love to say hi. Well, then everybody's here, and I have one. Did you want to introduce our? Okay.
Here in Strauss to our pulpit. We're delighted that she's here.
That's what I was going to do next. Yes. Taryn is the associate minister in Atlanta. Huh?
I'm Louie, actually.
Oh. Welcome. Sorry, I did not see you. Welcome back. Always good to see familiar faces. Anyway, Taryn Strauss is the associate minister at the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Atlanta, where she champions creative expressions of justice and love grounded in UU theology. She's a lifelong UU, and I'm not going to read her whole bio, but I'd be happy to share it with you later. It's pretty impressive. So welcome to all of you.
Prayer from Lao Tzu. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. I'd love to invite Sierra up here to light our chalice this morning.
Good morning. My name is Sierra, and I light this chalice for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
And now please rise in body or spirit and join us in affirming our covenant. Goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to seek peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
The light of our chalice flame also represents the warmth of community. So won't you please take a moment now to turn to your neighbor, welcome them into this sacred space with a handshake or a hug. So I just want to make sure all the kids can see me. You can stay where you are as long as you can see me up here. Our story this morning is Reverend Chris Bice adapted this story from African Yoruba tribe. It's called God's Hat. Once upon a time, there was a village with a road that went straight through the center of town, much like this. One day, something strange happened in this village. God walked down the road one day, and she was beautiful. She wore a long, flowing robe. On top of her head, there was a wonderful, spectacular hat. All the people stopped to stare at God as she walked by, and they kept staring until she disappeared off into the distance. Boy, God sure was beautiful, said one man, and what a beautiful blue hat she had on. Yes, God was beautiful, said a woman from the other side of the street, but it wasn't a blue hat she was wearing. It was a red hat. Oh, you are wrong, said the man. It was definitely a blue hat. No, you are wrong, said the woman. It was definitely a red hat. As the two argued, others joined in the dispute. Well, soon the whole village was arguing. All the people on one side of the road were certain that God was wearing a blue hat. And you're the blue hat people, you got it? All the people on this side. And all the people on this side of the road were very sure, very absolutely certain God was wearing a red hat. People got mad and, they started screaming at each other. They started screaming, blue hat, blue hat. Blue hat, blue hat. That wasn't really angry enough. Let's see. Over at those guys and this side of the road, they were screaming, red hat. people became so angry, well, they decided to build a wall that went straight through the center of town. From that point on, all the people on one side of the wall were enemies with all the people who lived on the other side of that wall, and they never spoke to each other. On one side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a god who wore a blue hat. And on this side of the wall, the people built a church where they worshiped a god wearing a red hat. Many, many years passed, and the people were still enemies on either side of the wall. One day, something spectacular happened once again. God came walking back through the village. She was smiling and she was balancing on top of the wall as she walked through the center of town. This time she was wearing no hat at all. All the people ran up to the wall on either side and they said, "God, you must settle our argument." "Yes," said one man, "the people on that side of the street say that when you walked through the village many years ago, you were wearing a red hat. But we know better. We know you were definitely wearing a blue hat. So tell us, God, what color was your hat?" God looked puzzled for a moment and began to scratch her head and thought, "I think I remember walking through this village many years ago," said God. "And on that day, I believe I was wearing my hat that is blue on one side and it's red on the other." And saying nothing more, God continued balancing, walking down the wall until she disappeared off into the distance. It was very quiet for a moment. And suddenly, there was a sound of one child laughing. I wonder if one child wants to give us that sound right now. All right. And then another child started laughing. Hey, and then another. Soon, the whole village was roaring with laughter. Let me hear ya. Everyone was laughing because they realized how foolish they had been, and they started laughing harder and harder and louder and louder. Until finally that wall, it began to shake and crumble until the bricks just came tumbling down to the ground. And for many, many years after that day, the people told the story of God's hat and how laughter had torn down a wall between a divided and foolish people. And that is our story this morning.
And now we'll sing our children to their classrooms for the morning.
Oh, that's right. Oh, no, it goes like this.
As a clergy person, I'd like to welcome you all to the apocalypse. Pull up a chair and make yourself uncomfortable. If when you think of an apocalypse, you picture a scary, doom-filled punishment from above, you're not alone. Originally, though, apocalyptic literature existed not to scare the bejesus out of children so that they would be good boys and girls, but to proclaim a big, hope-filled idea. that dominant powers are not ultimate powers. Empires fall, tyrants fade, systems die, God's still around. In Greek, the word apocalypse means to uncover, to peel away, to show what's underneath. That's what this country has been experiencing in recent months. There's not been a sudden uptick in sexual misconduct and assault in our country. The Me Too and Time's Up movements are simply exposing what was already there. The male domination at the center of the sexual harassment issue is being revealed apocalyptically and in prime time. Wokeness and policy change are a start, but not enough to dig out the full infection. This is why I welcome our moment of uncovering. We need to see how deep the heresy of domination runs, and then remind one another that dominant powers are not ultimate powers. So if those who came before looked to the Bible to justify their dominance, then let us look to it to justify our dignity. It's in there. Theology and liturgy are just too potent to be left to those who would use them, even unwittingly, to justify and protect their own dominance. And sometimes the origin of the harm really can be the most powerful source of healing.
Actually, you all can bring the lights down a little bit. Let us breathe. Let us put hands upon heart and feel the warm connection. Let love in this moment flow. Breathe in, say to yourself silently, I will love myself. I will love others, and that love will heal the world. On this weekend of International Women's Day, we extend our hearts to all women-identified women and girls who are living in violent situations, who lack bodily autonomy, who are suffering across the world. We send our hopes, our prayers, and we take action for a better, safer world for all women. At this time, I invite you to say out loud in your own quiet voice the name of someone you are holding in your heart this morning. As humans have gathered for millennia, so we gather on this day to gently surrender to something beyond ourselves, to humbly acknowledge our mistakes, to ask forgiveness, to seek hope and renewal, to honor the earth that supports and sustains life, to remember that all beings are inextricably and mysteriously connected, to feel that connection. So now we still our bodies, we still our minds. We take in a big breath and exhale. We relax into this space that our intentions make sacred. We enter into the wise silence.
Good morning. I'm Ken Yeager, co-chair of the Partner Church Committee, along with Dick Dawson. Some of you know that Dick's not doing terribly well, so we can hold him in our thoughts. I was up here last year, and I want to thank you for your generosity when you dug into your wallet and contributed to the Partner Church funds. I'm reminded in the hat scenario here of the hats that the people in Golfava wear when we visit there and when they get our money. It's not the money that they like. They appreciate it. They use it well. It becomes a catalyst for some of the other people that have a little bit of money to give and do something with it. But they have a hat on that says gratitude. They love the recognition. They love the attention that they get from us being there. I hope it's an appropriate example, but it reminds me of a child when a loving parent embraces that child and the little person just glows in that attention from their parent. And that's similar to the way I think the Romanians view us when we visit there and when we help them with some money. They like the attention very much. It's very worthwhile. As some of you know, we had a trip about 5 years ago. We will be doing another trip again at Easter time. We'll leave on the 11th and come back on the 22nd. We'll be there for Palm Sunday and then again for Easter Sunday. So if some of you want to go on that, this is we'll have a meeting in the meeting room after church today. The repairs that they've done to the church, I think I've talked about, you've seen pictures. The church is now looking a whole lot better. It's been painted on the exterior and interior. A lot of the woodwork has been repaired and so forth. The project that they've been working on more recently is the minister's home. It had some major cracks. You could almost stick your hand through the wall on part of the house, and that's now been repaired, and that's in good shape. So as you reach into your wallet for the offering today, I hope that you will give generously to our Romanian friends in Golfava. Thank you very much.
Okay, the offering has left the room, so I'm going to symbolically bless the offering. It is a blessing to grow roots in this community, but also across the world to the other end of the globe, to stand for freedom of belief and expression, to support a community who is striving just as we are here to do something bold, to create holy beauty, to proclaim freedom and love. It is a blessing to spread our wings, the wings of our resources, to touch the end, all those parts of the earth that are so far from us, and to draw them ever nearer. We are so grateful. Blessings on this gift. May it go far and wide. May its roots reach deep. May its wings spread out and do the most good for the most people. Amen. Blessed be.
And please join me in the dedication of the offering. The words will appear. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
Welcome to the apocalypse, says Reverend Nadia Boltz-Weber this morning. Here we are in the revelation, in the uncovering. Do you feel it? Now, let me hear you. Do you feel it? Yeah. The crumbling of dominant powers. We sense this happening on a national scale, and this upheaval trickles into our personal lives too. I wonder if you've experienced the chaos in our world trickling in to your life. What dominant power may be crumbling little by little? What structure in your life or your community is tumbling down or needs to come tumbling down? On a grand scale, our fragile democratic institutions seem to be coming apart at the seams, so much more fragile than I grew up believing them to be. Rife with corruption, fascist ambitions, and a misanthropic loyalty to greed that the best American satirists have barely captured with all their alarm bells. Oh, and the seas are rising, apocalyptically. With the advance of the Me Too movement, structures of power and institutional safety have begun to crack, forming fissures of reckoning, fraying at the seams of honesty. Who knows what more will come? I see a headline and I wonder sometimes if the Catholic Church will survive my lifetime. It's a real possibility. Now, they may not. Well, as for me, I've never had much use for peaceful, tepid waters. I've never thrived under passive allegiance to structures of power and institutions. I will be the first to chip away at a foundation built on the backs of people who are kept poor, forced into servitude or silence just to maintain structural equilibrium. I'll never forget when it was my turn to say the Pledge of Allegiance at my elementary school in Oak Park, Illinois. Actually, this was not in Oak Park. This was in Knoxville, Tennessee. Wow. In my middle school. I had waited all year to read the morning announcements. And then when it came time for me to lead the students in the Pledge of Allegiance, I said in my clearest teacher's pet voice, "It is now time to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance." I cleared my throat dramatically. I inhaled deeply. And I said nothing. Oh, I kept the mic on, though. The principal nudged me. I looked her in the eye, said nothing. The seconds ticked by. I gripped the mic with all my strength. What ensued next was a struggle. It was pandemonium. Well, it was chaos. And I did get detention. I prefer the biblical definition of chaos from the Septuagint, the original Greek translation of the First Testament. The Greek term chaos refers to the void state preceding the creation of the universe, or cosmos in the Greek creation myths. Or it refers to this initial gap created by the original separation of heaven from earth. So if chaos refers to the gap created by this separation of heaven and earth, then perhaps we are taking a gap year. Well, really, it seems to be turning into what many parents with young adults might recognize as an extended gap period. So the early scriptural Greek concept of chaos, it's not nothingness, it's not everything. It is instead a wide chasm, a fissure between heaven and earth, between the place we live and where we hope to go, a potential destiny. Reverend Boltz-Weber affirms that dominant powers are not ultimate powers. And our Me Too movement and our Black Lives Matter movement moment of uncovering, it is time to justify our dignity rather than use the Bible to protect dominance. What has been revealed here is the chaos of where we are versus where we thought we were, or where we hope to be. Once chaos has knocked on your door, see what happens if you let it in without resistance. This time, work with it rather than against chaos. Now, I'm not suggesting we all stay in this prolonged stage of chaos, living between this gap space between where we are and where we wish to be. It's not a fun place to live. It's anxious, but if we can work with it, recognize it as a naturally occurring chasm, like the mysterious, beautiful, dangerous Grand Canyon, before we move through it, and find each other again, finally resting in true community. Recognizing when we are in chaos is central to befriending it and creatively moving through it. Just this past week, I have noticed more chaos manifest, widening this gap between what we thought was resolved and bringing us back down to earth. Chaos happens when the International United Methodist Church votes to break apart irrevocably rather than affirm the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender priests who have already been serving, working, ministers, who have already been serving, working, and preaching in their congregation for many decades. Will we cover up what has been revealed to us apocalyptically? In his social bonding theory, psychologist M. Scott Peck would describe that move of covering as pseudo-community, where people rest in small talk, where they maintain the status quo. They use it to maintain structures of power that degrade each other, all the while insisting it's no big deal. They'll just find another church that wants them. It'll be fine. Chaos was generated once again this past week in our own denomination, this time when our magazine, the UU World, published a personal essay of a white cisgender woman grappling with accommodating transgender people into her viewpoint and her experience. Sadly, this piece, I don't know if any of you saw it, problematically titled, "After the LGB Caused Harm, Caused Deeper Fissures Across Our Denomination as we try to heal and find our way through institutional white supremacy and other ways we tend to replicate the dominant secular culture that marginalizes transgender people rather than imaginatively create healthier systems and spaces that center trans people's lives and experiences." My friend and longtime UU, Alex, tried to express their concerns to the UU World's editor and to the article's author. And they had this to say: if the UU World wants to do a feature story about trans people, it is essential that trans people be given voice and agency and be centered in that feature story. not cisgender people. I cannot emphasize this enough. You have a choice here about whether to actively support trans people and help the UU movement as a whole move forward, or to harm trans UUs by continuing the current trend of marginalizing trans people and helping cisgender UUs feel seen and justified in the resistance to creating basic access for trans UUs, much less fully inclusive and affirming spiritual homes. Alex goes on to say, they are speechless about the title of the article for so many reasons. They are frustrated by the lack of actual spiritual content or connection to faith. But mostly, Alex is tired of cisgender people holding out their good intentions as progress. At the end of the piece, yes, at the end of the piece, when the author writes, this is about building relationships. It's about being respectful and listening and helping to fight when asked. Well, that just felt like a slap in the face to so many transgender UUs in our movement. They heard Alex, and they chose not to listen to them, to respect Alex and hundreds of other trans UUs. They chose not to help fight when asked. This internal confusion and external experience of chaos makes Alex question if they want to leave the church. It just feels too broken sometimes. The UU World magazine is trying to avoid chaos, but instead stepped right into it. In fact, generated more chaos, deeper chaos, thrusting people into its orbit, and more appropriately to the early Greek, into its chasm, right? Its gap. And now we've entered the backlash to the backlash, where UUs are complaining of the high sensitivity of people who feast at the table of righteous indignation. And the chaos continues. There are groups, particularly in Quaker educational settings, who experiment in praxis with M. Scott Peck's stages of intentional community that requires you to move through pseudo-community into chaos until finally reaching what he calls true community. As a graduate of a Quaker educational institution, I have participated in these experiments, which are typically in a facilitated classroom environment over the course of a semester, or facilitated workshop over the course of a long weekend. These many decades later, I'm still processing everything that happened during those experiences, and much of it was too personal to share in a sermon, too painful, but others have written eloquently about the praxis, the experience, educational experience of chaos. Writer Jerry Hampton offers his experience of chaos in a community building workshop. Each workshop has its rhythm, and chaos is the staccato at a very high pitch when the cymbals clang. Participants learn they are different, and they start to explore those differences. They may begin with a big bang if pseudo-community has been too long or too inauthentic. In my first workshop as a facilitator, about 2 hours into the process, a man was relating a sweet saccharine story about his mother, and a lady suddenly jumped to her feet and proclaimed, "All this talk is sickeningly sweet, and it's all fake. You are all a bunch of phonies." Chaos had begun. Most people avoid chaos as if it were a life-threatening disease, and it does feel when you're in it like dis-ease. In chaos, people let go of their manners. They blurt out their prejudices, opinions, and judgments. There may be transference or projection towards others, but often this is about a person or situation outside the workshop that comes in. In chaos, people often try and fix each other, convert each other, and all this only adds to the chaos. I can affirm this firsthand. People often say, now, if you just do what I would do, your life will be much better. If you believe what I believe, your life will change, it will improve. People don't like this advice, they mostly reject it. In chaos, people exhibit chaotic behavior. The talking pace speeds up, the shy people can't break in, there's no space. People feel an urge often to speak when there is nothing to say. They don't listen very much and hear themselves talk just to get through it. It's full also of avoidance. This can take many forms, and one form is to scapegoat someone. This causes the focus to be on the scapegoat and away from those who are doing the scapegoating. And we do this often in religious community. We scan the horizon for someone worse than us. Another ploy is to attack the leader for not leading more or leading better, whatever that looks like. They may attack the leader or ask the leader to do a lecture and an exercise. They may attack the guidelines. I don't know if any of this is familiar to any of you. The only way out of chaos and into community is through emptiness. And as much as we want to escape chaos and get to emptiness when people finally let go of those tightly held beliefs, those judgments that help us know who we are and what we believe. When it's time to let that go, we just sit in emptiness. And often there are a lot of tears when you reach emptiness. But before that, we must make some kind of friendship with chaos. I will say this about my experience. If you can find a way to reveal the darkness that you fear lurks within you in front of your community, the epiphany and the release is more exhilarating and transformative than anything you can imagine. And I pray and I hope the author of this article will find her way to understanding where she has gone wrong. I think repentance during this time of Lent, the season of Lent, has a real place in our movement to turn, to try and do better, all the while loving each other. Chaos is painful to experience, but if the community can empty themselves of their defenses, if they can be open with each other's differences with curiosity, it can be a powerful source of healing. It can be complete transformation into a rich and intimate sense of belonging, which feels a little bit like surviving each other. I actually think some of this does happen in our religious education classes and our whole lives classes, where they go through these things together. So how do we survive each other? I looked to various teachers for an answer. I looked to Anne Bogart, the famous stage director who encourages conflict in her theatrical rehearsals because it generates revelation, authenticity, and innovation on the stage. And I do believe that church, that worship is the rehearsal for the beloved community. This is the place where we can engage in conflict and face it differently than we would with our families or our coworkers, navigating different traffic patterns. I'm not encouraging conflict here necessarily, but we need not avoid it either. I turned to Buddhist practices for a methodological answer, how to work with chaos. Buddhist nun Pema Chodron, in her seminal book, When Things Fall Apart, suggests that because times are difficult globally, we don't need to add more depression, more discouragement, or more anger to what's already here. It is becoming essential that we learn how to relate sanely with difficult times, she says. She offers us 3 traditional Buddhist methods for relating directly with chaos as a path of awakening and ultimately joy. The first method is, surprise, meditation. It's meditation. That should not surprise you. She's a Buddhist nun. Recognize your overwhelm. Connect with breath like we did earlier. Connect with the present moment. Connect with self. Self-love. Release bias. Release negative self-talk. We're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Remember the gratitude of being alive, she says. The second method of working with chaos is using poison as medicine. Chodron knew a Tibetan yogini who trained with this view of not exorcising demons and instead treating them with compassion. The next time you were in conflict with someone or even pain, instead of trying to get rid of it, breathe it in. Breathe in that feeling. Name it. Let it connect you to others who may be feeling a similar pain. We move through our personal connection to the feeling and we breathe it in for everyone in our community who is feeling it too. Seek out kinship. a desire to heal and care for others who are sharing in your pain, even in the midst of conflict. I didn't read a comic book until my early 20s, and even then, I think most comic book readers might discount this particular text, which is really more of a graphic novel. It was, when I finally did read a graphic novel, it was Linda Berry's autobiographical work, 100 Demons. Yeah. In order to explore some chaotic times in her personal history, she researched an ancient painting exercise called 100 Demons. Berry found a hand scroll of inner demons painted by a Zen monk named Ikaku in 16th century Japan. She used an inkstone, an ink stick, and in the Sumi style of ink brush painting, the demons began to come. You can see them kind of surrounding the cover title. If we can identify our demons individually, then we can invite them in, show them compassion, reduce their power over us. Our behavior habits can be our demons, ways of reacting to people that we created out of trauma, out of the need to survive trauma. You can take the slide down. Perhaps you tease others and make jokes because your parents teased you too much and made jokes the instrument of their dominance over you. And you maintain some semblance of dignity by laughing with the joke. Maybe you are quick to anxiety and scarcity because your family of origin was one of conflict, always moving from crisis to the next crisis. But the problem with that is this: what served to protect us during times of crisis in our lives is not going to serve us as an overall life approach, especially when we are in community with others. We have to let go of the crisis response, create a different, more sustainable, more compassionate response. But don't ignore your demons, or they will become louder and louder until they are all anyone can see or hear. Are you with me? Name your demons. See them for who they are. Learn to love them. And better yet, do what the graphic novelist Linda Berry did and laugh at them. You know, she had demons such as, one of her demons was head lice, dancing. You know, these were her demons, and she drew them, and was able to love them. What are our communal demons? How do we as a community invite them in, honor them, and make them a healthy and creative part of our story so we can move forward? May we creatively engage our demons and not allow them to dominate us and take over. I think we need to make art together, to play together, to explore our demons together. We need a ritual of naming our demons, having compassion for them as we try to close the gap between how we respond in chaos and who we want to be together. The third method for working with chaos is to regard whatever arises as the manifestations of wisdom. This is according to Pema Chodron. Everything that occurs is sacred, even the misunderstandings, the wrong-headed articles being published, even the difficulties and the pain. I spent a few months as a chaplain in the emergency department of Beth Israel Medical Center in Manhattan, and I know something of this sacredness. Chodron says the emergency department is grounded in honesty about how the human realm functions, how it smells, how it bleeds, how it's full of unpredictability. And at the same time, there is radiant wisdom, acts of grace, and opportunities to help, endless opportunities to help. It is an energetic and awake environment, rife with drama and intense communication, all in the service of life. It is a confusing, disordered collection of moments, the emergency room, when people are perpetually asking themselves and others, where do we go? Where do we go? How do we relate to the raw material of our existence? Chaos is beautiful because you are beautiful. It is full of pain because you are full of pain. It is full of wisdom because you are wise. Chaos awakens us to each other and to that gap between where we are and where we are going. In chaos, we have a choice. Avoid what's underneath our defenses or identify what is behind the door of protection. Each interaction with chaos is a choose-your-own-adventure book. It's an active choice to embrace honesty. Though it is messy and painful, to cover it back up and return to something false would be moving backwards, moving back towards the earth. Chaos is naturally occurring when we are ready to release ourselves from the systems that uphold dominant powers, even if we benefit from that. When we yearn to arrive somewhere beautiful and true together, more common ground. So name your demons, know them, and take that leap between the gap from where we are to where we are going. Once we recognize we are struggling with chaos, we can also experience the sweetness and the glory of knowing we are in it together. We will come through the other side, armed with compassion for our demons, for each other, for our shared pain, and we will carry each other across that gap between earth and heaven. Amen. Please rise and join me in singing number 100. I've got Peace Like a River. Please remain standing and join hands for our closing words, if you will. These are the hands of someone who may have some demons, who may have some prejudices, some learning to do, who may have something they're afraid of, something they're wrestling with. Can you see those demons? Can you love them? Can you love them through it? May you go in your day and in your week knowing that we all have work to do, to befriend, to love, to exercise our demons, to lift each other through this time of chaos, and to reach down deep for compassion for self, compassion for one another. Go in peace, go in love. Blessed be.
hand.